Welcome to another episode of Conversations with Zena, my AI colleague, where Zena and I explore several aspects of human AI collaboration. I'm your host, David Espindola. My guest today is Michael Ulin. Michael is a co-founder and CEO of Tenki AI, an AI forecasting infrastructure company bringing rigorous probabilistic reasoning to prediction markets and strategic business decisions. Michael has over a decade of experience in AI and entrepreneurship with a track record of scaling AI startups from zero to millions in revenue and collectively raising over $78 million. That's a great background, Michael. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you. Great to be here.
Also joining us today is my co-host, Zena. Zena is an AI that has been trained on my work. And if you would like to interact with Zena, you can go to brainias.com/Zena. Hi, Zena. Welcome to another episode of the podcast.
Thank you, David. Always a pleasure to be here. I'm excited for today's conversation and looking forward to diving in once we get started.
Yeah, I'm excited as well. So let's dive right in. In today's episode, we're going to talk about AI entrepreneurship and the roles of AI and human intuition in making predictions and strategic decisions. Michael, you have an extensive background as an AI entrepreneur. Tell us a little bit about your journey and what you're focusing on today.
Sure. Yeah. Always try to be up to something interesting. I got my start off doing management consulting at a McKinsey company right after college. So did that for a couple of years back when we called it big data, and before it became machine learning and then AI. But helped companies in their journey with big data, and then made my way over to the Bay Area, where I joined an early legal tech startup called RPX. That's where I met my co-founder, where we became friends and worked together. And we used early natural language processing to identify patents that might be of interest to RPX's clients. So we worked with a lot of large technology companies and their intellectual property groups. After that, I left and joined up with a couple other ex-McKinsey guys, and we started a company called Zesty AI, where I was the head of AI. Zesty was one of the first companies to apply AI to the problem of underwriting and pricing for property insurance companies in the United States. So we built the first AI-powered wildfire model, and then several other climate risk models powered by AI. Scaled that company, raised about $50 million for it, and worked with a lot of large insurers like Farmers, AAA, Allstate. Did that for 8 years, and then generative AI kind of came to the fore. So I think prior to that, we were in this kind of era of what I'll call discriminative AI, where we had these very narrowly focused applications, so like underwriting models or say pricing models for airline tickets. And then we got generative AI with like ChatGPT and the ilk. And so I thought that was going to be the next paradigm shift. So started a company called Paxton AI with another ex-McKinsey guy. And Paxton is dedicated to using generative AI for legal research for small to mid-size law firms in the United States. Scaled that through Series A. So we raised about 28 million there, scaled very rapidly by offering really easy to use and lower cost tools for things like legal research and drafting. And then left last year to do it all over again. I just really love the 0 to 1 early days of company building, and consider myself very lucky to be able to operate in that space and stage of companies. So my kind of professional passion besides AI has been probabilistic forecasting. That's what I studied in college. Like, how do we use statistical models to understand things like, elections, policy events, economics? And I think today we're finally at the state where the AI technology is there. We have this prediction market tailwind as well, where these things are just filled with really great forecast questions. So, our goal is to take AI agents and encode them with, what we know works from fields like game theory, economics, political science, and make those rigorous probabilistic forecasting techniques available to a much broader audience. Whereas, before you might need to hire a consulting firm or an economist to actually implement something like this. Today, with AI offering, PhD level intelligence on demand, we think there's an opportunity to make those techniques more broadly accessible. And we're starting with prediction markets just because it's a really rich source of data.
Very good. So help us understand what prediction markets are. What exactly happens in prediction markets? Who are the players? And how is AI helping us navigate that market?
Yeah, it's a concept that's been around for some time. I think one of the earliest, and maybe even the earliest prediction market was at the University of Iowa, where I think you could wager like a couple dollars on the outcome of the presidential election. And the idea is that markets are really great at aggregating information, and so prediction markets are a type of futures contract where you can actually trade on the outcome of a specific event. So everything has a timeline for resolution. Everything has clear resolution criteria, and it's always structured as a binary yes or no. So is this team going to win this game? Yes or no? Will this politician win an election? Yes or no? And most prediction markets are structured such that if you're right and the event does happen, you're paid out $1. And if you're wrong, you're paid, you lose what you invested. So you're paid out nothing. And, the hope is that with enough participants and with enough information, that price, that range from $0 to $1 will start to reflect the actual probability of an event occurring. And we can use this to gauge what markets or what the public thinks the likelihood of a particular event will happen. And so that's the hope. And the smaller experiments around prediction markets got started in I think the 70s or 80s, and now they've become huge with the major players like Kalshi and Polymarket. I think they're both worth about $12 billion each in terms of their last valuations. And where Tenki comes in, where our company comes in, and where AI comes in, is that we want these markets to function better and to be a better reflection of the odds or the true reality or true odds of a particular event occurring. And the problem with the prediction markets as they are today, there's like 12,000 different markets you can trade on like Polymarket alone. And for an individual to evaluate like, are 12,000 different markets appropriately priced? It's impossible. But an AI agent can actually do that, and that's what we do at Tenki. We scan over all these markets, come up with our own forecasts for the markets, and then help traders understand. Does our forecasted probability differ from the market price? And that's when we consider there to be a buying opportunity. But I think, if participants are able to actually understand and scan through thousands of different markets so that they can select the ones they want to participate in, that's going to make them function better. That's going to result in more accurate probabilities. And, that's what we hope to enable people to do here at Tenki.
Yeah, no, that's a really interesting field. And, the piece of this puzzle that really is fascinating to me is the fact that, the human brain is a prediction machine, right? We make dozens or hundreds of predictions every single day without even realizing it. So what do you see as the biggest mistakes that we as people make under uncertainty as we're trying to make predictions?
Yeah, I think there's been a number of studies around this. I think it's not a surprise to anyone that humans and even experts in fields are not great at producing forecasts. We tend to have our own biases, whether it's information availability bias or some tribal attachment to one team or one political party or another. And those biases can creep into our decision making processes. And most people, when making a decision, don't have the time to do a rigorous probabilistic forecast. I certainly don't. And so we rely on gut feel for the vast majority of decisions. And because it's really hard to do forecasting well. Historically, you've needed like a PhD economist or a statistician, and probably a very large budget and a couple weeks of time. And so it's kind of been reserved for high level decision making within corporations or governments who can go hire an economic consulting firm to go help them think through that stuff. But with AI, we can apply these techniques in a matter of minutes, not weeks. We can do that more consistently. And AI is subject to its own biases, but it's not like there's a very famous study around judges and their decision making in terms of like criminal cases or civil cases. And if you do get in front of a judge right after like lunchtime, there was actually a statistically significant finding that you tend to get more favorable decisions out of those judges who have just had they're not hangry, right? So.
So bring the judge to lunch before you get to court, right?
Exactly. That's statistically the best time to have your court case if you have one. And so there's been these studies over the years about how to actually make better forecasts. And what was surprising. It's not experts relying on gut feel that do the best, but it's people who apply decision-making frameworks, try to identify historical analogies or base rates for the particular thing they're trying to forecast, and then are just like ruthlessly critical of their own work in a way that I think is beyond a lot of people to be that dispassionate about forecasting. So we know through academic studies that technique results in better forecasts, but it's just really hard to apply until today, where now we can have AI agents apply those same techniques and do it in a lot more cost-effective and faster manner.
Yeah, so I want to dig into that aspect of prediction a little bit. And I want to go back to a conversation that you and I had earlier. And what we talked about was this idea that I thought was very intriguing. And the idea is that if assuming everyone has access to AI, right? And AI can do this amazing job of analyzing vast amounts of data and making just incredible predictions, the markets will become very efficient and therefore less profitable. But you said something that I thought was really interesting and I think is critical. And what you said was that humans can add our own intuition, which AI doesn't necessarily have or doesn't use intuition, obviously, to make predictions. So tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I think, as a company, we hope that, for every trader, for every decision maker, they're going to be relying on a Tenki forecast to help make their decisions. And we think there's a lot of inefficiency that can be addressed that way. But if you're talking about like financial markets where you have kind of this competitive nature between the participants, if everyone's relying on the same information, then suddenly that edge disappears. And I think we're certainly still in a time where not everyone's relying on AI to help them make decisions on these markets. And I think, for our customers and for people who adopt this now, there's an opportunity while there's still some laggards to have that edge just by using AI to make decisions in these spaces. But back to our earlier conversation, I think how do you differentiate in a world where everyone has access to those same tools and those same models? And I think it's going to be that kind of human element, that extra dash of creativity or randomness that'll help certain participants stand out versus others. So I think we'll get to a place where the best traders, the best operators will be this combination of human plus AI in terms of like, we're going to have this base information, this base forecast that the AI produces, but then the human's going to be really the one that can add that creativity that hasn't really been seen before. Because I'm sure people who've interacted with AI and AI agents have come to appreciate that it's not as creative as the best human writers. It's not as creative as the best human thinkers. But if you can enable the best human thinkers, the best creative minds with AI, I think that's when you tend to get the best results. And I think we'll see that in a number of fields, including forecasting. So I think that's where we're heading. There's a lot of fears about AI replacing people's jobs, and I think people who don't keep pace with the technology should be concerned about that. But I think if you live in a world where everyone has access to these same techniques, you're going to need to add something on top of that to differentiate. And I think that's going to be human creativity in the future. So I'm pretty bullish on human prospects going forward.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it comes down to human AI collaboration. That's where we'll see the best outcomes, is when you join those two components together. And that's what this podcast is all about. So I'm glad to hear you say these things. So I'd like to get Zena in the conversation here, and I'd like to ask Zena to ask you a question. So Zena, given Michael's expertise in using AI to make forecasts for prediction markets and for strategic decisions, what question do you have for him?
Absolutely. I'd be happy to jump in. So, Michael, given your experience with AI and prediction markets, I'd love to hear what you think is the most surprising or counterintuitive insight you've gained when using AI for strategic forecasting.
Yeah, interesting question. It's been a good gut check for me to try to make my own decisions on prediction markets and just doing horribly because I have my own biases, and I think AI is really good at giving you that other perspective that you might not consider. So there's this well-known bias called the favorite long shot bias, and so you tend to see this in prediction markets today, where most of the trading volume is still, we assume, still human, and that the heavy favorite in say a sports match or an election tends to be underpriced relative to how often they win, and you see long shots or underdogs, they tend to be overpriced relative to how often they win, and I think this reflects either maybe it's this this hope or desire to win on a long shot because that'll give you the highest payoff. So if you buy a contract on a prediction market at 10 cents and it wins, you've made 10x your money, versus if you buy something at 90 cents and it wins, you've only made 10 cents on the investment. So it's interesting to see that documented bias that's been something that we've known about for years in the field of psychology. You go and you look at the pricing on prediction markets, and you see that effect reflected in how often things resolve. So things that are priced really high, say 90 cents or 95 cents, are actually resolving at a higher rate than that price. And then things on the lower end of the market, say things at like 10 cents, actually only tend to occur like 5% of the time. So it's quite massively overinflated at the low end of the market for what people expect. And whether it's that hope or belief in the underdog, or just this desire for a big payoff, you do see these types of biases reflected in these markets, which I think is just fascinating.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating too. We don't realize how much biases influence our decisions and the way we see things and the way we go about doing things. But it's there, and once we have technology like AI, one of the beauties of AI is that it can really help us see some of these biases and help us understand the data a lot more clearly. Now, Michael, I'd like to switch gears a little bit here and talk about entrepreneurship, and in particular, being an AI entrepreneur. So you were an AI entrepreneur before most people could even spell AI. And I'd like to hear from you. What are some of the key lessons that you learned from building Zesty AI and Paxson AI? And what are some of those lessons that you have taken and applied to Tenki AI?
Yeah, it's been a really interesting journey, especially how the field has evolved over the years. I mean, when we were starting at Zesty, like it was a challenge to get people to care about AI. It seems hard to think about now, where it's a topic everywhere, but people didn't quite understand why it would be important or how it could add value. And it was kind of a real uphill climb for us to actually convince people to care. I mean, but I think today it's kind of flipped. It's like, well, how do you stand out amongst the crowd of people offering AI solutions, and how do you differentiate yourself? And I think in both cases, the solution that we've arrived on is like, you need to be delivering value, and you need to communicate that value. And so, yeah, it was kind of cool that we were using AI for the insurance industry, but they really cared about results and whether this was actually going to help them in their ability to model, say, wildfire risk. And so, AI might have some, it might get some attention, but if you can demonstrate that you're delivering business value, that's how you build a sustainable business. Mm-hmm. And I think, I see a lot of companies today that seem to just be, they're hanging their hat on just being AI for a particular industry or for a particular workflow, and there's maybe there's something magical about just having AI for, I don't know, outbound lead generation. But if you're not actually delivering value, like it doesn't matter if you've used the fancy new tech or the fancy tool, you're not gonna have a sustainable business. People aren't going to renew people are not going to renew your contract, or sign up in the first place. So I think couching things in return on investment in results, regardless of how you get there, regardless of the tooling that you use, is important for communicating value to people. And you can't just hang your hat on hey, we're using a cool technology as your only differentiator, because now everyone has access to this technology. So right. I think you're going to have to differentiate based on delivering results.
Yeah. So as a follow-on question to what you just said, one of the things that I'm seeing is it seems like everybody now is an AI entrepreneur. So, but the concern is, how do you build a moat, right? It feels like the moment you come up with something, some application, someone else with more funding will come and eat your lunch. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I've never been a big fan of the concept of a moat. I think you do right by your customers, right? Like you deliver value to them. You continue to deliver value with them, and that's how you get customers that renew, customers that love you. You're not trying to like trap them, right? I think that's just a very adversarial way of thinking about your customers. And so, I mean, you do want to think about how you can deliver more value over time. And I think with AI businesses, like you can get a sustained advantage through a unique and proprietary data set. So something that doesn't exist on the internet, or something that's really hard to come by. So like, with Zesty, it was really our database of losses. So if there had been an event like a hailstorm or a wildfire, and then which properties were negatively affected by that, that's not just information that's readily available in the public domain. It took us, years to accumulate that, and actually, it's what made our models better over time. Was that data flywheel of seeing how the models performed, and then figuring out how to feed that back in to do the next iteration of the model. And then at Paxton, it was based on a public data set, which was the laws, rules, regulations of the United States. But in the United States, we have a federal system. So we have the federal government, we have state level governments, and we have county and municipal governments. And they all have their own laws. They all have their own court cases. And sometimes they interact with one another. So, federal law tends to preempt state law. So we built a data asset around the mapping of all those relationships between the laws, which doesn't exist off the shelf. So that sort of building on top of public data, but building something that doesn't exist elsewhere, I think was important. But I think it's similar to other types of businesses, like brand can be a moat or a differentiator. Embedding deeply in customer workflows can make a product stickier. But I think ultimately you want to work on a really important problem that your customers care about and deliver a delightful solution, and that's what's gonna win you sustaining business over time.
Yeah, so it's back to basics, right? The business is no different than any other business, right? It's about fulfilling a customer need and being really good at taking care of your customers and making it profitable, so that there's a win-win on both sides.
People overcomplicate it,
Yeah. All right, so I'd like to get Zena to give us her thoughts on this. Zena, what do you see as the main opportunities, if you will, or some of the challenges for AI entrepreneurs out there?
Sure thing. Well, I'd say one of the biggest opportunities for AI entrepreneurs is the sheer range of problems they can tackle. There's a lot of space to innovate, whether it's in prediction markets like Michael's doing or in other niches. On the flip side, one of the challenges is definitely navigating the ethical landscape and making sure that AI is trustworthy and well aligned with human needs. So it's a mix of big possibilities and thoughtful responsibilities.
Yeah, absolutely. So, we didn't talk much about the ethical side of things here, but that's definitely something that we need to be thoughtful about. The governance process, dealing with ethics, dealing with privacy, dealing with, all of the ethical issues that come up when you have a conversation about AI. So, Michael, we're running out of time here, but I'd like to get your final thoughts. What advice would you give founders that are in the process of trying to find product market fit in this rapidly evolving AI market?
Yeah, great question. I often, it's interesting that this advice is readily available, but people still trip up on it, and I always try to validate demand for something before investing a lot in the product or the company or the go-to-market. And I think people get it backwards, where they're like, oh, I have this brilliant idea. I'm going to go work on it for a couple months, couple years, and then I'm going to emerge, and it'll be so cool that everyone will just want what I have. And that rarely works. I think it's much better to go talk to 50 customers, as many people as you can, and understand what their pain points are. Customers are not, they're not going to be the experts in what to build, but they are experts in their own pain and their own problems. And so understanding what's really top of mind and what they really care about is critical. And then you go build something around that. And then there's going to be demand for that once you do have a product that's ready. But I think so many people flip it and start the other way. And they end up, going in the wrong direction or wasting a lot of resources building something that people don't want. And I hope people can save a lot of heartache by just talking to people and asking what would be meaningful for them to solve.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all about finding that pain point, and in order to do that effectively, you need to do your research. You need to talk to people. And I think that's the essence of being a good entrepreneur. Great conversation, Michael. Where can people find you if they want to get a hold of you?
Yeah, so check out Tenki. We're at trytenki.ai. I'm on X and LinkedIn, Michael Ulin. We also have pages for Tenki on those platforms. And yeah, love to hear from people. So don't be a stranger. Feel free to reach out, and happy to chat.
Very good. Thank you so much for being a guest on our show today. And Zena, thank you again for being a great co-host.
You're very welcome. It's always fun to be here and help out.
All right. Thank you so much, Michael.
Thank you.